Welcome to the show. Chris Graham and Ray Petree here on a Friday talking AEW Pro Wrestling. And we got a couple of shows to review. We have this week's Dynamite, of course, but also the Full Gear pay-per-view, which Ray reviewed for us from over the weekend. And Ray, let's start there. I thought it was a pretty good show. We previewed the show on last Friday, and as we talked last Friday, it felt like there were a lot of matches that we just didn't know, and we could argue either way the booking could go. Makes for a good pay-per-view. I thought by and large the show succeeded. Get your thoughts on the general overview, the general tone you thought from Full Gear last week.
I really enjoyed this show a lot. I think it's in the top half of the pay-per-views for this year from AEW. Like we said last week, and like you just touched on, a lot of these finishes, a lot of these results were unexpected. They were hard to predict. I think they really were toss-ups, and a lot of the matches were really enjoyable. There were a few standout matches. None of them were. I don't think any of them were match of the year contenders in my estimation, but a lot of them were really good, and that's what you want. You want a lot of solid matches on the show.
I thought so. Let's go to the main event of that show because that's the main event picture right now in AEW. And even with that, as we previewed last week, Orange Cassidy challenging Jon Moxley for the AEW World Title, it felt pretty solid that 99.9% chance that Jon Moxley would leave with the belt. But even that said, as I'm watching that match last Saturday night, there were a couple of moments where, the way that match was laid out, structured towards the end, I thought, hey, I can see logic to maybe Orange Cassidy sneaking away with this. So I thought that match actually achieved more than I thought it would going in.
For moments, it was able to suspend my disbelief. I thought to myself, maybe Orange Cassidy wouldn't be so bad as a world champion. And it just goes to show these two work so well together. They have so much great chemistry, despite the fact they've only wrestled a handful of times. It's not like in the past or in WWE where you do a house show circuit and you practice and these guys have wrestled like three times together, and this was fantastic. It speaks to their ability as wrestlers, and even if the ending was predictable, the result was predictable, the ending was anything but predictable after the match. That was quite shocking from every phase. I outlined it, I enumerated it in my review, which I rarely do because it was so hard to keep up with, but all of it was shocking to me.
Yeah, there were a series of run-ins, at first predictable run-ins, just because we'd seen the back and forth between the Death Riders, as they're now called, and Orange Cassidy's crew, the conglomeration, and then it elevated to Hangman Page and Christian Cage, and now I wanted to have a bigger talk about how the ultimate ending to that pay-per-view was. Darby Allin comes out as the final surprise run in, if we can say. He crashes his truck into the Death Riders escape vehicle, if we can call it. And so, we have been talking as we previewed the show last week. Darby Allin has been positioned to be a player in this main event picture. And then there's the odd booking of he's been squashed a couple times recently, including, so we'll jump ahead to this week's Dynamite. The main event of this week's Dynamite was a Continental Classic match with Darby Allin taking on Brody King, and Brody King getting a rather clean win, dominant win, not quite a squash, but as close as you can get between two guys of that stature. And okay, so on the one hand, we're booking Darby Allin to be the last run-in at the end of a pay-per-view involving the world champion, and on the other hand, he's been getting beat down a lot lately. Trying to figure this one out. There's a story being told. I'm not sure I'm into it quite, or I'm onto it quite yet.
Part of me feels like we all expected Darby Allin to be the end game for Jon Moxley in this championship run. So maybe they're building up to him being put on the shelf for a while, because clearly you look at the match a month ago against Brody King versus on Wednesday night, two very different matches. And it's not like Brody King has improved drastically. So obviously the problem is that Darby Allin has sustained a lot of damage, a lot of I mean, he literally was in a car crash on Saturday night, but he's probably accumulated multiple car crashes over the last month between getting attacked by Claudio, you know, fighting the Death Riders, then crashing the car on Saturday night. I mean, he's clearly not physically well, and you think at the end of this Continental Classic, however far he goes in the tournament, he's not going to be better off than when he began it. So I wonder if we're going to put him on the shelf for a while, let a few other people challenge Jon Moxley and come back to Darby Allin later on. It's hard to say. I mean, part of me wants to think that they're obfuscating the fact that Darby Allin's the eventual next champion by making him lose so much that he has to go away for a while and gets hurt. But it's tough to say. I mean, AEW oftentimes is planned so far in advance the booking that it's hard to tell. Maybe things have changed. Maybe Darby Allin's going to have some kind of ridiculous underdog comeback from behind story in the Continental Classic, and I don't know, but I'm leaning towards the fact that he's probably going to get hurt and have to go away for a while.
Yeah, they're sending him out there. The match with Brody King, he's out there with loads of athletic tape on. So losing clean when you're, in that they're showing his physical discomfort. They're definitely telling a story as far as that goes. But having your guy that you think might be a contender, even a few months down the road, they'll have to repackage that if that's the case. I wanted to jump away from review for a brief discussion, or a good discussion perhaps, of a guy that is missing from the main event picture, noticeably so. Ricky Starks, and we've seen, if anybody out there watching this follows the dirt sheets as they're called, there've been, I mean, we've seen Ricky Starks interviewed a few times, and he's expressing his displeasure with how he's been handled or not handled. He's saying, at least publicly, that he's not even hearing from Tony Khan. He's not hearing from anybody inside AEW. Yet we also read that he was backstage at Full Gear. And so that says something. If he's allowed backstage, that's something. But he hasn't been on TV since March. He's not injured. He was booked for some shows coming up next month with Game Changer Wrestling. And then we've now learned that those bookings have been canceled by AEW as part of a blanket cancellation for all AEW talents on GCW shows, but it's got to be based on Ricky Starks. Now, okay, so I'm going to take my hat off here, or maybe put my hat on, conspiratorial hat. This is where it goes. Okay, so could that be just, okay, we haven't had anything to do with Ricky Starks in a while. Let's send him out there, let him do some interviews, talk up how unhappy he is. We'll book him with GCW. We'll take him off those bookings, and we're setting up a anti-authority kind of figure thing here, or are we just putting wrestling storylines onto real life there? And he's just really unhappy. They really can't wait for his contract to be up, and this is not a work. This is real life.
Unfortunately, I came aboard the Augusta Free Press in late May or early June, right after Double or Nothing. And he'd already been absent at that point. So I haven't really had the chance to talk much about Ricky Starks, who I genuinely love. And he's, for a long time was a huge reason why I enjoyed AEW so much. I wasn't really happy with the tag team title run because it was transparently obvious that it was a transitional kind of deal, and it didn't make him look better on the way out. I guess we're going back. Is it a year now? He was at the Royal Rumble backstage with Cody Rhodes. He was filmed on camera, at the event. Didn't deny it, didn't run from it, didn't hide from it. Was there because he's friends with Cody Rhodes. This goes back to a few months ago. We had a conversation about Phoenix and Pentagon Jr., Penta El Zero Miedo. And in the past, Miro, of course, as well, that you have these guys who are under contract. Why would you not just let them leave? For so many years, wrestling fans have been pretty critical of WWE for this. I mean, what we would consider bad business. You have guys that are under contract. You extend their contracts when they don't want to be there. It's not very, we can throw around ethics and morals and things like that. I don't really consider it ethical. And I don't know when exactly his contract was extended into 2025. I don't know if that information is out there. Maybe it is, and I haven't seen it, but his contract was extended in 2025, despite the fact he's not wrestling. I don't understand why. And I don't think this is an angle. I think this is very real life. I think he's hesitant to say why because he's afraid of legal ramifications of saying things like that. But I mean, he wasn't just talking to a dirt sheet. Chris Van Fleet, who he did his interview with, is a Hollywood insider, someone who interviews actors. He's not just a wrestling guy. So it's not like he went to Dave Meltzer or Brian Alvarez and expressed his displeasure with the company. It's unfortunate because I think this guy could be a pillar of AEW, and he's had great matches, is obviously incredible on the microphone. And I always go back to that feud he had with MJF at Winners Coming 2022. That was just phenomenal. And it always seemed like to me, you got to loop back around to that because those promos were so great. I mean, they almost did 1 million views on television on a promo leading up to that event just because they're so great on the mic together. It's unfortunate, but I feel like he's probably WWE bound when his contract's up. He probably will go to NXT and be repackaged, and we'll see what happens. But I don't think he's coming back to AEW, unfortunately.
I remember I was a big fan of his uh, cut short feud with CM Punk, and that was cut short because CM Punk got released, and that was terrible timing for Ricky Starks. That was going to elevate the heck out of him.
Mhm.
I've enjoyed his work since his days on Billy Corgan's NWA. First seeing him in, yeah, I would much rather see him in the main event picture. I've expressed that I'm not a big fan of Darby Allin being in the main event picture in AEW. I would love to see Ricky Starks up there. I see him and Daniel Garcia as two guys who are potential future pillars, in addition to MJF, guys who are could be homegrown talents. But yeah, they seem like they've pushed him away, no doubt, Ricky Starks. So, um, speaking of, so we traded emails after the full gear. Both enjoyed the show as we were just emailing each other privately about that. We've not communicated back and forth about what we thought of this week's Dynamite. I did run your review this morning that you wrote last night of the show from Wednesday night. I will just say, and I think I concur with you. Having read your review as I was editing it, um, I was not a fan of this week's show. It's the first one in a while I could say that I really wasn't a fan of, and this is a first as well. When I'm watching the shows, there are always lots of other sports options on. I'm a sports TV viewer pretty much, but I almost never, and in fact, I don't think I can't remember recently a time that I have turned off, flipped off the show to watch something else, and then maybe decided to flip back. But this week I did that. I saw during a commercial break during Dynamite that a basketball game was close that I was following, and I decided to flip the game on for the last 5 minutes of the game because this show was, this AEW Dynamite show was underwhelming. So that's a first for me. That's a first for me that I can remember in a long, long time, and that's not good. I mean, if I'm doing that and I'm a diehard, I wonder how many other people did as well.
Yeah, I mean, when we can get into the granular, but I just think at the from um, looking at it from the macro, they did not do a good job of blending in the Continental Classic with regular television segments because let's be honest, I love watching in-ring wrestling, but no one wants to watch it for 2 hours. So you have to pad it with some segments with some guys on the mic, promos in the ring, backstage that create some filler, that create some separation. And this was a lot of good wrestling and not a lot of good wrestling television, um, which I think a lot of people would say has been an issue for AW for a long time. I think more often than not, the people in the ring that are doing, or the people doing the segments are talented enough to save it, but this wasn't enough for me. And like I said, we can get granular with it. I mean, not having MJF there is not helping them at all. Despite the fact that he's actively engaged in a feud, that he sends in pre-recorded tapes where like you can see the sunlight hitting him in the face, despite the fact it's the middle of the night in winter. There's just lots of things that I mean, Adam Cole's not very entertaining right now. You have Mariah May popping up, attacking Mini Shirakawa in a pre-recorded interview. Why is she not on TV? Mercedes Moné not very good on the microphone. They are aware of that. Camille definitely not good on the microphone. She used to just not talk in the NWA, and that was on YouTube. So I don't know. There's a lot of head scratching decisions here. What did you think about it?
Even the Jamie Hayter Queen Amanada match, which I liked as a match, a standalone match, they kept talking about it being part of some tournament, and I never. I mean, maybe I missed like at the right of the beginning of the match, and I probably did because I was flipping back and forth between a basketball game. But it, I never felt like it was clear what that was for, And so you're telling me it's for something, and then I don't know what the thing is, and I don't really. Even if they had told me what the thing was, I don't know that I would have cared. There's another tournament going on. There's the Continental Classic. We can't have all these things going on at one time. You got to focus your energies here. Maybe if you're going to do a women's tournament of some sort, do it at a different time, or have it be, its own standalone Continental Classic. I mean, I don't, there's too much. It's almost like in Tony's head, it all makes sense. Tony Khan's head, but it doesn't get out. The announcers aren't being either spoon fed enough to work with, or they're not doing a good job, as the case. I don't know who to blame there. It's kind of like, I write about college football and college basketball a lot, and I do granular detail analysis of UVA football, UVA basketball, and you know who to blame there. If the play calling isn't good, you blame the offensive coordinator, you blame the coach. The quarterback maybe isn't making the right reads. I mean, you know who to blame. I don't know who to blame for this stuff. I guess at the end, it's got to go to the coach here, Tony Khan, because it's his show and he doesn't have a booking committee. He doesn't have writers. It goes through him, and that's not a good indictment on him. That's not a good look on him. That we are people who follow this closely and love it. And, I schedule my whole day on Wednesday around this, and I couldn't wait to flip the channel.
Yeah, they're doing this International Women's Cup with the interpromotional Wrestle Dynasty thing, and I feel like the onus falls on Tony Khan in New Japan to like make a video package to introduce this. You don't give it to your commentators at the beginning of the match and say, here you go, here's a minute diatribe on explaining this tournament that we're doing within AEW to send a competitor to the cup to win something that really means nothing at the end of the day. I mean, I understand for CMLL and Stardom, tournaments matter a lot, so cool. But in America, if you win a tournament, it kind of needs to produce results. Like you need to get a title shot, or it's like they did the Owen Hart Cup with those beautiful belts, and the belts are beautiful, but what does that matter? In the end, it became a shot for the title at All In. So, um, I you know I we hear a lot about like RJ City helped Tony Storm and Ryan May plot out the story that they had. From my understanding, Will Washington has been working with Jen Pepperman and Mercedes Moné and things of that nature. And it's like, I wonder at times how much Tony Khan really is involved in the booking versus these, he said it at a media scrum that it's 26 different writers or agents helping him. What does that mean? What are they coming back with you with ideas and you're saying yes or no? Are you booking things and you're sitting down with these guys and you guys are workshopping it? I feel like really throughout AEW's entire existence, a lot of problems have been that the creative process seems muddled. Because I doubt that Tony Khan's booking a lot of this stuff himself. And I think the people he has working with him, it's maybe too collaborative, it's maybe too open to consideration when you need someone firmly who really knows what they're doing, like a Jim Ross, like a Dutch Mantel, like a Dusty Rhodes, or a young Vince McMahon, or Triple H, of course, who knows wrestling in and out, knows what it's like in the ring, out of the ring, backstage, who can say yes or no to these things and edit them more constructively. Because I mean, you have this tournament, and you don't have a production for it. There's nothing to introduce it. You just have your announcers doing it, and that just seems pointless. Another problem I have is that we have a pay-per-view in 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, and then a week and a half later, there's another pay-per-view in Japan So you're simultaneously booking two things when, I just think there's way too many pay-per-views now. Way, way too many. Where as opposed to, earlier it was four pay-per-views and it was five with Forbidden Door, which still was kind of like, oh, you have Double or Nothing and then Forbidden Door so close together. You're kind of rushing the build there. Now it's a pay-per-view every month, and sometimes you have two pay-per-views in a month or in the span of 2 weeks, and I just don't think he can stick the landing all the time, and it really hurts the product.
I was thinking the same about the Continental Classic. I love the concept because the concept is based on the G1 Climax, which is the best month of wrestling in any calendar year.
Yeah,
um, and it's rushed because we started it this week. It's 5 matches. The G1 Climax is 9 matches,
yeah.
and so you get a great cross pollination there of guys, and wins and losses matter, but also losses aren't devastating to a person from a booking perspective because you're going to go. I mean, even the guys who win are going to go 7-2, to get to the next round of the climax. And with 5 matches, it's just quick. And we're told this week that it leads to the next pay per view, which, like you said, is just a few weeks away. I would love to see that be given some air and let it sit out there for a bit and have good matches on Dynamite and Collision each of the next few weeks. And, and the good thing about the climax isn't that it's a tournament. It's that, when you're 7-2 through that, and maybe you win the semifinal, win the final, and get the title shot. Okay, so the two guys you lost to, though, I mean, so now all of a sudden there's potential matches there. The champion is involved in the climax. And the champion inevitably loses a match or two on the way to the conclusion of that whole tournament, and that sets up matches. So there's a lot. So Tony is taking something that's a good concept, a wrestling tournament, but he's not doing the best part with it. And I'll go back to something you said there too, Ray, about the okay. So it's not just one idea, one guy writing it all down. It's maybe 20, 25 people doing it all. You can kind of see that in one respect. Wednesday night, Chris Jericho does his Lionheart press, his moonsault from the middle rope. And that was early in the first hour of the show. Like Ricochet did the same move a match later in his match. Little things like that. Hey, if we're gonna have a lion salt, I guess we're gonna have a lion salt. No one else on the show is gonna do a lion salt. I mean,
Yep.
little stuff like that. If you're going to do a sunset flip power bomb, no more sunset flip power bombs. Little stuff like that. If there was somebody, it doesn't have to be one person writing it all down, but if you had one person that was the gatekeeper that could say, all right, so, you guys have this idea for this match over here. You guys have this idea for this match over here and how you're going to lay it out. Let's not do the same things in the matches. Let's save it, so that it puts it over more. And there's that. there's lack of follow through on good ideas that aren't followed through on all the way. There's lack of cohesion from match to match. We love it, but it could be so much better if there was just a little bit more. And we're 5 years into this. If there was just a little bit more organization to it, it could be so much better.
And I think even, my biggest indictment of the show is that you have a Ring of Honor World Championship match on AEW television when, I'm sorry, but if you're not trying to grow, you're dying, right? Because there's no such thing as flatlining in television. If you're not getting better, you're only going to get worse. And I mean, right now the ratings are, kind of plateaued in a sense, but they oscillate a lot between about 150,000 people any given week, and that's not good. And you're not attracting more viewers by having another company's title being defended on your TV as if it's super important. Given the fact that Chris Jericho holds the title, and regardless of what you, me, or any other wrestling fan thinks about Chris Jericho, he is famous. Um, you know, I don't. They have a Ring of Honor television show. Yeah, it's on Honor Club. They're trying to get it on television. I understand that, but you should put that on that show as a marquee attraction for people to go sign up for Honor Club. If people aren't signing up for Honor Club because Chris Jericho's a champion, then what does that say about Chris Jericho?
And if people aren't signing up for Honor Club anyway,
Yeah,
I said this at the beginning of Ring of Honor when there was that when Tony bought the company and split it off, and make it a YouTube show, make it available for free. Let's get people's eyeballs on it. Do that if your end goal is to have Honor Club be a pay service, or your end goal should be a TV show. Whichever of those it is, get eyeballs on the message. Tony's already writing checks for guys he's not even having wrestle. So if you're gonna put money in this promotion, put money in the promotion, get people watching it. I mean, I don't know, because it's a private company. It being AEW and Ring of Honor, they're both private companies. We'll never know their internal numbers. I just can't imagine that it has any draw with there can't be 5,000 people watching those shows. Whereas when I used to watch the YouTube AEW B and C shows,
Yeah.
and you would see those numbers, and there'd be 20, 30, 40,000 people watching those each week. And they would have a debut live, so to speak. They would on Monday at 7:00, I think it was, and there'd be a countdown, and you could see how many people were watching. So, it's his money, but I think there are better ways to do it. And I agree with you, though. Our Ring of Honor, there shouldn't be, the title shouldn't be defended there. Hint to it. Do a package on Dynamite, do a package on Collision, and say, coming up on Honor Club this week, or coming up on the YouTube show this week, if it was me booking it. On Monday night on YouTube, there's going to be a match between Ishii challenging Jericho for the title. Have them on the show talking trash. Have them on Dynamite or Collision trash talking to each other. But make people go to those shows and watch them instead of putting them on AEW. And why do I need Honor Club? The title's being defended here.
Absolutely. I mean, unless you're a big Athena fan, which I don't blame anyone because she's great and a dominant champion, but I don't watch Ring of Honor programming.
Yeah.
To be frank,
Yeah.
I'm a subscriber to Honor Club so I can watch the back catalog of Ring of Honor, but I'm not tuning in to Ring of Honor every Thursday to watch the show. At a certain point, there's just too much wrestling in our lives. But yeah, I don't understand the benefit, and it was a kind of a long match. Not a very great match. I don't think Jericho and Ishii complement each other very well. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of things about this episode I liked, and I'm not saying it was more bad than it was good, but it was definitely not up to the caliber that they've been working at recently. I mean, Dynamite's been great for the last month, and this was just not as good as those episodes were.
Yeah. The lead up to Full Gear, I felt like there were several good shows in a row, and this one just fell flat. And when you're doing pay-per-views every month or two in a month, as you say, there's a couple coming up in the next few weeks, pretty much back to back. You can't afford to have a week off. You can't afford that, because now, one axiom in ratings, and of course the ratings aren't out. I looked before we started recording here today, Friday at 1 Eastern. Because of the Thanksgiving holiday, the ratings are going to be delayed. I can't imagine this show pulled in the ratings because of factors like Thanksgiving was the next day. Lots of people are traveling out of pocket, so to speak, and that kind of thing. But the ratings for a show tend to be a reflection of how last week's show went. And so those of us who did tune in, those of us who weren't traveling or out of our usual realm, if you're at your parents' house or your family's house far away, you don't want them to turn wrestling on when you're there. If you just read about this, you're going to say, "Oh, I didn't miss anything last week. Maybe I won't miss it this week either." For those of us who did watch, we might be of the same opinion. We don't need to tune in. So ratings for next week are going to be affected by ratings for this week, the quality of the show this week. So that's something to keep in mind as well, unfortunately, for AEW. All right. Well, we don't often, these shows aren't often sort of, be that critical of AEW shows, but this week's show sort of deserved it. After a really good pay-per-view, it really deserved it. And final thoughts, Ray, as we move forward and looking forward to next week in Dynamite.
One thing that's been on my mind is this Grand Slam Australia, them having to move the venue. You go from a stadium to an arena. Not a good sign for AEW. Not a sign of health, of growth. And like you said, I don't want to belabor a point. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but things have to start trending in an upward way, because you don't just plateau in entertainment business. You're either growing or dying. And I hope that next week they recover. Just in terms of the entertainment quality, obviously, like you said, I don't think the ratings are going to improve after a week like this, but at least drastically. But I hope next week they bounce back and we can start rearing this Continental Classic in a positive direction.
We will work towards that, indeed. Well, Ray, as always, thank you for your time, your insight. For our viewers out there, listeners on the podcast, go to Ray's reviews. They're right there on the website under Pro Wrestling on Augusta Free Press. Thanks, Ray, as always. Talk to you next week.
Thank you, Chris.